Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast and Happy New Year, Connected Yoga Teachers. Okay, so very often we hear from yoga teachers on this podcast, and today is extra special because we get to hear from a yoga student who is sharing some really powerful thoughts around how they're feeling right now, especially with silence. If you're new here, it is amazing to connect with you. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and this podcast is being recorded on the traditional territory of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Mississauga people. I am continuing to learn about the culture of the Anishinaabe people who were here long before my settler ancestors arrived to Turtle Island generations ago. I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, a mom of 3, an entrepreneur, and a forever student who loves to ask questions. And that's why I'm really grateful to be able to podcast and share that with you, because I get to ask lots of questions on here about yoga and what will help yoga teachers and running a business, all the things. And every week, I'm super grateful for you. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm almost ready to cry. I'm super grateful to you for being here and spending the time here to listen, and to the amazing people who have been on the podcast. We're coming up to 7 years. We have talked to people from all over the world about various topics, and I'm so honored that you're here on this journey so we can learn together. And that learning is like unlearning tough spots, learning some more. And it's okay if it's messy. Today's episode is powered by OfferingTree. This is something that actually makes my business not messy. It makes it very organized. I use and love this software in my own business because it automates everything. I know that when someone books, they pay online, they'll get their Zoom link, they'll get reminders, and so much more when they sign up using OfferingTree. And we have a special discount code for you if you want to check it out. That's over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. This is the other hat I wear because I'm super passionate about getting pelvic health information to people, especially in yoga spaces. And I have a story to tell you, actually, to share with you about our upcoming Yoga for Pelvic Cancer series with Tyla Arnason. It's beginning January the 10th, and I have some huge, exciting news to share with you about this. And I feel like if I share it, you might even be able to possibly use this in your own yoga business. So it was really important to Tyla and to us that we make this series accessible, especially to people dealing with a current or past cancer diagnosis. So we had a different pricing option set up for the cancer community. And then we were looking at like an early bird for yoga teachers. And I just thought, you know what? Let's try something. Let's try to make it pay what you can. You know, I get sick of capitalism so often, and we are really passionate about offering scholarships and making things financially accessible to everyone. And so this pay what you can idea, I am so excited to share that it is working. So when you go to register, you get to set the amount that you can afford. And if you can afford to pay a little bit more, then it'll help someone out who cannot. Maybe someone in the cancer community, or maybe a fellow yoga teacher or healthcare professional or support worker or support person that cannot afford as much. And it has been so beautiful to see people doing exactly that, paying a little bit more to support other people. So if you're wondering who's this series for, it's a 6-week yoga series. It's for anyone who has a current or past cancer diagnosis. So we're going to focus on pelvic cancer, but anyone who's dealt with cancer can benefit from the series. And also, it's for people supporting those who have cancer. So yoga teachers who want to learn more, or we just had an OBGYN sign up this week because they're working with people who have pelvic cancer. So really, anyone can sign up. If you want to support the cancer community through yoga, or if you want to join a yoga class that's specific for cancer, you can join. To do that, go over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com and click on yoga. We'll also put a link in the show notes. And if you cannot attend live, don't worry, you have access to the replays for a full year. And if you are listening beyond January the 10th, 2024, don't worry, we are going to put the replays up so that it's an on-demand course and you can still access it and it will still be pay what you can. And I am super excited because I feel like since this worked this time and we made enough money to pay the teacher and not lose money, then we'll do it again. So support it so that we can support another yoga series and have it be pay what you can. Okay, let's get into the episode today. I'm really excited to just dive right into a conversation that I had with Suzanne Miller, who's a yoga student who's been practicing for 25 years now. And as you're going to hear, she's currently going to a hot vinyasa flow studio. And she had an experience that I think is really important for us to all hear as yoga teachers. And I'm going to let her share all of that story. And as you listen, please note that Suzanne decided not to share this with the teacher who was leading the class or the studio, but she did start to question if she was attending the right classes or even if yoga was the place for her. So I think that's important for us to know as we listen. Okay, let's dive right in to my conversation with Suzanne. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Suzanne. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm very happy. Thank you.
So I loved the bio that you sent. For our listeners who don't know you, which is probably a lot of them.
It's everyone.
Because I'm really grateful that I'm connected with you as a yoga student, not as a yoga teacher. I talk so much to yoga teachers, but I also love in the bio that you sent, you said that you're a lawyer by day. Also that you said, I'm a single mom and neither of my teenage daughters like yoga. I also occasionally teach law school at nighttime. Oh, and I meditate. And you shared also that you've been practicing yoga for 23, almost 24 years now, and that you've done lots of kinds of yoga. And right now you're going to vinyasa flow in a hot studio. Is there anything else you'd add to that of like who you are?
Thank you. No, I think that's it. Being a single mom, practicing yoga, and having practiced yoga through all the different stages of my life. Like I started when I was in my 20s. I practiced yoga through getting married, having kids, going through a divorce, moving towns. Like yoga has been a constant. I know when I show up to a yoga studio, that's going to be a place where I can get really grounded and connected. And it's something that I return to time and time again. Even in times of great difficulty of my life, I feel like I can show up at a yoga class, not even talk to other people, but practice in community. And so it's been an important part of my life.
Oh, I love that. As someone who also like similar journeys in that I started yoga in my early 20s and then same thing, like practice throughout, having my kids, getting divorced, being a single mom. I really get it. And I think what a gift, like for you to share that. Also, I feel like, you're one voice in this. We're going to chat about what it's feeling like for you right now. But I think there are other students. Well, I know I'm hearing from other students and other yoga teachers who are feeling the same thing. So let's dive right in and talk about how it's feeling right now, because you and I are talking. It's the middle of December when we're recording this. And since October the 7th, we've seen Israel really react to the October 7th attack and then take it out on what feels like to me, take it out on the civilians of Gaza. So that's how you and I sort of connected. I was sharing things and then I don't know how it came up, but you were saying like it feels really you tell me, tell us how it's feeling like as a yoga student going to class right now. What's happening in the yoga spaces you're going to?
First of all, it feels very surreal right now. I feel very like everything kind of turned upside down in the past 6 weeks. And so, as I was saying, yoga community has been a place where I go and get grounded and come together. And it has been very surreal to show up in the middle of a genocide and no one's talking about it. Like we're all acting like it's kind of just another day in the neighborhood, and it has kind of reinforced sort of this sense of loneliness on top of all the other feelings that I'm having as I watch this genocide unfold. So it's kind of created a weird little distance. I'm still going to yoga, but it feels surreal and disconnected.
Right. So are teachers saying anything? Are they say to sort of like, you know, are they mentioning anything that makes you think, "Oh, maybe they're talking about what's going on in the news right now?"
No. In fact, if I could share a quick story, I showed up at class one day and it had been a particularly difficult day in Gaza, and I can't remember the specifics, but I had watched a video from Bassan, one of the independent journalists in Gaza, and she was saying how water has been rationed, and the rations, finding drinkable water has been difficult, and the rations are getting smaller, and how she only has access to a small amount of drinking water a day. And a small boy had stolen her water out of her backpack. And she could not blame him. She got it. I mean, that's sort of where we are. Small children are stealing water. And I was looking around my house and I was like, oh my God, I have so much water. There is so much I'm taking for granted. So that's my headspace that I'm showing up into yoga class. And I talked to the teacher and I said, and she goes, how are you doing? And I said, I'm okay. Like I didn't know how to answer the question. I was just like, I'm okay. She's like, oh, I'm doing great. And she talked about all these great things happening in her life and how she was grateful. And I thought, well, maybe that's a door. Like maybe gratitude is a door. And I said, I just found out that people in Gaza have very little water a day, and I'm grateful I have water. And that's where I'm coming today, in yoga class. And she looked at me like I was not even talking English. Like she was just kind of confused, and she was like, "Yeah, sure." And then she just turned around and did something else. I was like, "What just happened?" I mean, here's the thing, Shannon. Even if you didn't know what was going on, right? If someone came up to you and said, I'm aware there's someone who's having, I shared that her water had been stolen, like I shared the whole story. Like, isn't that a moment to pause? Pause and just be with you don't need to know anything. You don't need to be an expert, but just like that, I can't stop thinking about that experience. That to me kind of encapsulates that feeling of disconnection that I'm trying to convey.
That story right there is a powerful one of like where you're witnessing, you're seeing, you're also feeling like I have so much here I could share. Like you're feeling connected to someone who is sharing a story of what it's like right now to be displaced, to lose your home, to basically lose everything and then to lose access to water. Um and you're right. You're right. In that moment, even if someone wasn't following the news at all, had no idea what it was about, you're right. A moment to pause and to just say, tell me how that's feeling for you. Tell me um, what might be helpful in yoga today. What are you hoping yoga is going to offer? Because maybe I'll weave that into my class. Like I realize the teacher is not responsible in that moment to do a whole history lesson on Gaza and the water excess there.
Totally.
But you're right. It's a disconnect. I think this is a powerful example of how teachers might not know their students are feeling like this because you didn't say anything more. It doesn't sound like you didn't go up to her at the end of class and say, "Hey, this is important to me," or "This feels weird," or
And I didn't. And what's so interesting, Shannon, is that is part of the empathy I hold for teachers because I'm a white woman. And what have I been trained my entire life? Like, don't offend people, be nice, don't be angry. It's part of my encoding. I I feel uncomfortable and vulnerable if I approach a teacher who's in a position of authority who I see 3 times a day, like, so I'm having to unpack that. I'm having to do the work. And so I have empathy when people don't know how to respond, and maybe feel uncomfortable raising what they think are difficult conversations because me too. And yet we have to try and kind of have that be and fail, right? Like, and maybe offend people. But I didn't feel seen. I think that's really it. Just seeing people. There's a million things going around in the world. There's a million personal difficulties. Like when I was going through a really difficult divorce, you can tell when you look into someone's eyes, or maybe you don't know, but what is it that like 14% of all people are going through some trauma?
right.
So it also comes down to being trauma informed. And honestly, the skills of being trauma informed, like that's almost all you need right there. To see your students. And it's challenging. And I'm reflecting on being a new law teacher in addition to practicing law and looking at my students and feeling like, wow, they're that feeling of how do I bridge that gap or how do I connect? So I've also been on that side as well. So this is all from a place of empathy, and yet also we need to do better.
What makes this different than going, let's say you went to the grocery store and the grocery store clerk was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And you were buying water and you shared this water story with the grocery store clerk and they were like, "Ugh," and moved away. Like what makes it different when it's a yoga teacher?
Oh, that is a really powerful question. And I think it gets back to why I practice yoga. So, and what is the purpose of yoga for me? So, for me, yoga is a practice of being in discomfort and bringing breath and awareness in that discomfort and staying with that direct experience. It's a practice of I practice for the discomfort at the grocery store by that hour on my mat so that I can greet that discomfort with some equanimity and a sense of humor, and I don't get tight and I don't contract. That's the whole purpose of yoga for me, is to meet discomfort with breath and awareness. And part of the reason why yoga teachers have this amazing opportunity and why classes are so powerful for me is when I am with a teacher who can hold the space so that I am psychologically safe and physically safe to hold that discomfort, I'm really able to grow my practice. Like I'm really able to stay with greater amounts of discomfort and always go into that edge, whatever that edge looks like. So, what is different for me is when a yoga teacher is uncomfortable with something like a genocide, that is signaling to me that there is a discomfort that is too big for yoga.
Mm,
Why am I here if the tools of yoga can't help me deal with genocide? For me, that is where it feels different?
Oh, that's a really powerful question, because I've had some conversations with fellow yoga teachers right now, and there's an immense gratitude shared by a lot of us for like the practice of yoga right now, as we're speaking up, as we're having tough conversations, as we're witnessing a genocide. And so it's really powerful to hear you say, like, if you go to a class and it doesn't feel like that support is there all of a sudden. And I think, it is a lot to hold. Like there may be teachers who are watching the news and are feeling super triggered, and then, are worried. So let's get into, like, what do you think is going to happen? Like, why do you think yoga teach, let's say they're worried, like, oh gosh, if I say something, I'm going to upset someone in this class, or these people are coming to class and they just want to, kind of unwind and maybe for an hour forget about the news. Tell me what you think the worries are, and let's like let's think on how to help the teachers
Uh,
in this.
yeah, I've been thinking about this. Um, so one thing is, I think in community, I think a powerful question for teachers is not, do we talk about it or not, but maybe a question of, how do we talk about it? So I think there's not one right way. And again, I think that's I kind of question my own whiteness a little bit, right? Like there's a right way and a wrong way, and I'm going to get it wrong. And if I get it wrong, like that's, God, it's so interesting, right? So one, just to acknowledge that discomfort that comes from the shame of getting it quote wrong, kind of questioning that thought, just sitting with that first. And then shifting to thoughts like, how do I meet my students where they are? Or how do I raise the topic? And so I think the answers are, there's probably 100 ways to talk about it. And I think the most important thing is to kind of one, think about, am I viewing this as a very transactional experience for my students? Like, am I worried I'm going to lose customers? And is it economic fear? And that's real. I mean, the reality is we live in capitalism. We may not like it. We may have lots of thoughts about it. It is the thing, right? So again, sitting with the discomfort. Here's the thing. We can offend people for lots of different reasons. Some people may not like namaste, right? We may offend people because we're not doing enough core. I don't know, but I feel like anyone can be offended at any time. You can offend people. You don't offer a shower. Like, I don't know. Like, there's
Right.
too many people in the room. Let's just, we can offend people all the time.
Yeah.
Like, people are going to get offended. How do we hold space for people who are offended? So let me just share a quick story. I am part of a spiritual group that meets every 2 weeks. We meditate, we read spiritual things, and we talk about it. And I asked the teacher that could we pray for Palestine after a meditation. And we prayed for both Palestinians and Israelis. And afterwards, I had all this like righteous indignation. Like, and it's not that, okay, so full disclosure, I think everyone should be prayed for, right?
Right.
Like, just, I'm putting
Right.
that out there. I felt like I had all this, I was offended. I was like, oh, she doesn't understand the situation, and I am going to help explain to her. So we had a one on one check in, and I brought that energy of being offended, and she met it with love and understanding. And actually, I realized that me being offended, it almost like melted away in the face of her love. It is not that I changed my position, did a spiritual bypass, slipped into complacency. She and I had a very transparent conversation. I just want to be honest about that. But don't forget that yoga gives us all the tools to meet anything students bring, because you're the leader. You're the sturdy leader of this class. You're holding space energetically. And I find that I'm able to do that when I have a personal practice. So when we have personal practices, we can hold, we don't get into the water with other people and drown with them. We hold space for them energetically. And so when you have that, just I think trust ourselves in the moment to navigate it for your studio and your class. It can look like a lot of different things. It can look like simply acknowledging world events and pain, and stop there.
I love that story of how you were like, I'm really angry. And it's not that you wish any harm or you don't think that Israeli people need prayers. You just feel so strongly right now that like the people in Gaza, Palestinians all around the world are facing a tremendous amount of suffering. I get that. I get, and I love how the teacher met you with love in that. There's a fantastic live. I feel like I'm going to watch it every week now. I can't even remember who did it. I'll link to it in the show notes. And it was all about how to navigate tough conversations. And it's exactly what you're talking about of like getting curious, being like taking your time with it, meeting someone with love or like curiosity or questions instead of like, okay, I'm going to shift your mindset right now. So, okay. I also want to say that how would we know how to navigate this as yoga teachers? Like, I want to say, I love how you said, just try, do it messy, because honestly, in our lifetime, we've never seen, especially like on our phones, on our social media, right in front of our face, we've never seen a genocide like this. I was just reading a statistic that in the 20th century, there's never been this high rate of civilian casualties in all of the wars put together, including the First and Second World Wars. So, how are we supposed to know how to do this?
Yeah.
You know, that's the real empathy for yoga teachers and humans, you know, and yoga students walking into a class, because you'll have someone like you who just witnessed the story, connected with someone's basic human need, like a basic thing that all humans should have. And then someone who's just walking in like completely out, like has no idea, hasn't watched the news for years.
What a great opportunity for that person to learn about it.
Yeah. There will be yoga teachers who say, like, I don't want to learn about the news. I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about war in my class. Is there anything that you'd say if there was a teacher and you were in a space like and they were saying that, how would it feel?
Oh, I feel so sad and so angry. I got to be honest about the anger. Um, how how is that the practice of nonviolence? I I mean, if we all agree that every life, namaste, right? I see the divine in you. Everyone had, if we believe, okay, so I'll take it to me. I believe every life has value. Every life has a spark of divinity. if I believe that, what flows from that? To watch suffering and to not acknowledge it and turn it away because it's like too big, again, personal practice, right? Like what is that thought? It's too big. And um I think those words, it's complicated, it's politics. It is a way of not sitting with the discomfort of what is happening. And I think that's where it really comes down to. And on a sort of cultural level, national level, I have been thinking about how a lot of how on the international stage, if we haven't healed the wounds from World War II, they are really coming back. And what I find so interesting is that the yogis in India, who the guru said you need to go to the West, that much of that activity, like I'm thinking of Yogananda, he came in the 1920s, I believe. It was right at the end of World War One, at a time of great suffering and uncertainty in the world. I'm wondering if that's not a mistake. So I, I guess I offer that anytime we're turning away from suffering, is that because we're just unable to sit with that discomfort? And if so, yoga is a wonderful way to practice that.
I fully agree. And I also think it is easier when we're doing this in community, like connecting with other people who are witnessing the suffering, not turning away, speaking up has been so comforting. And then it makes it feel like, okay, we can do this together. Like even a friend of mine and I were saying, okay, I need a break from the news, but I don't want to turn away. And we were talking about maybe we take turns. Like she'll check the news and just update me if there's anything massive happening so that I don't have to look at social media for some days. Like there are ways that we could do this collectively and peacefully, and to keep asking ourselves as yoga practitioners and yoga teachers, how can I have more empathy and compassion here? How can I do the least amount of harm? I'm having this, I want to say a beautiful conversation, but a really difficult one with a yoga teacher who's in Israel who has, you know what? I'm super grateful for her conversation with me. And she is living in a real place of suffering and fear right now. Like she is going down to her bomb shelter on a regular basis. She has friends and family that have been very impacted in Israel. And, there are parts of me that feel like, yeah, and all of these other people are suffering. Like I feel that come up, but then I think, well, this is what she's living. I would if a friend of mine was like, ow, I just fell and I hurt myself, I wouldn't say to them, 25 other people fell and hurt themselves today. Like, look at all those other people. I wouldn't do that. So and it's not been an easy practice. And I feel like it's teachers around me, mentors who are like rooted and grounded in some sort of a spiritual practice that help a lot. So I think it's possible. And I think that the more we do this collectively, I'm guessing, I'm just going to throw this out there, that I'm guessing a lot of our yoga teachers, if they're listening and they focus less on yoga philosophy in their classes, like just when I read that you're doing vinyasa flow in a hot room, is there a lot of yoga philosophy that gets weaved in?
Oh, no. And that's a whole other conversation. I started in Iyengar yoga. There's not even a lot of cueing. I mean, different conversation, but there's not. Although some teachers weave it in sort of like beautiful textured ways. You said something really important about community. We grieve in community.
Yes.
And I think a lot of, unfortunately, some of the West interpretation of spirituality makes it a very an individual practice. And when we come together in community, we're able to grieve, even just connecting with another person. What you said really resonated with me. I was at a party this weekend and it felt very surreal. And I was like, what are we doing? And there's one other person at the party who I know been posting about what happened in Palestine. And the moment to actually just connect with her was so powerful. I felt talking about it really helped. And being in community really helps. And here's the other thing. I think the solution is going to be in community. So what do I mean by that? Collective action. It's boycotts. It's protests. How powerful would it be to have all yoga students join a protest? It's the fact that that almost sounds a little crazy is weird, right? When we think about engaged Buddhism and nonviolence, like, we can advocate for justice in peaceful ways because we have that luxury because we're in the United States. So let's use that privilege and ability of collective action. I think community is the answer. And I'll just stop there. Community is the answer for all the things.
That's amazing. I love that. Thank you. Connected yoga teachers, I am popping in here for a moment to tell you about OfferingTree. Yes, they sponsor the podcast, and that brings it to your ears today. But I also use and love the OfferingTree software in my own business because it makes everything so automatic. Any yoga series that I have ever hosted online this year has all been done through OfferingTree because I love that the Zoom links, time zones, reminder emails, and texts and waivers are all there and they're all automatic and I don't have to think about it. And I also want to share another little bit about OfferingTree here that I haven't talked about yet on the podcast or in my email or anywhere really. That in the middle of me it was near the beginning of me starting to speak up for a ceasefire to save, hopefully, contribute to saving the lives of Palestinian people. I had a very threatening message by a yoga teacher left for me to, quote unquote, cancel me. Those words weren't used, but it was definitely implied. And this yoga teacher said that me calling for a ceasefire was anti-Semitism, which we know that it isn't. And her message went on in this very threatening tone, and there was a lot of hate speech mixed in towards Arab people. It was very harmful, and it was scary to see. And I also want to say that in that moment, I had a fair amount of compassion because I could hear the fear and the fight or flight reaction kicking in. And, when we're in a state of trauma, we're hoping that the people around us can have compassion. At the same time, this threat made me think of my entire team over here. So Crunch, Suzanne, Sinead, just clipping along, doing their work, who rely on the podcast as part of their income for their career. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm speaking up right now and they could be impacted and they're not even the ones that are making this choice. And then I thought of our sponsor. And I actually reached out to one of the co-founders to just be really transparent because I was starting to get worried that this threat of canceling me was going to, reflect on my whole team and our sponsor. And so I reached out and I said, this is a really tough spot. I explained where I was coming from, the views that I was sharing, that yes, I was going to do some podcasts on this. And if they wanted to pull sponsorship from those few episodes, I would understand. And I want to tell you that the response that I received back just renewed my love for this company. They assured me that they are a company with values that align with mine, that they really value human rights. And they told me that they would, of course, be continuing to work with us. This is huge because it really spoke volumes to me as a yoga teacher and as a podcaster who I want to make sure that the businesses I choose to work with and pay and share with all of you, I want to make sure that they're aligned with the values and the beliefs that all human lives are equal and all human lives are valuable equally. So this was a big thing. So here we are, still connected yoga teachers, few, thank goodness. This is why this podcast is still coming to you. And this is why it's still free for you. My other option would be to crowdfund each episode to try and pay for, we basically put 9 hours into each episode of work. That's on average. And that's a lot of time for our team. So I am just over the moon grateful for OfferingTree. If you also are in this moment, I would love if you would share some love with them. You can sign up for their software if you're needing one. That's over at OfferingTree.com/Shannon, or you can tag them in social media. You can let them know, we hear your support, we feel your support, we're grateful for this. So that's a long-winded love note to OfferingTree, but it's needed. Okay, let's get back into today's episode with Suzanne. I feel like I was going to go down this line of maybe yoga teachers are feeling because they don't talk about philosophy a lot in their classes. And I'm not picking on vinyasa flow hot classes. I just know because I've taught them, I've been to them, and oftentimes the focus is not all about yoga philosophy in those classes. But it's really gives me a lot of hope that that's what you're attending and you're expecting more right now in terms of holding space for what's happening in the world. So I wonder, for the hot vinyasa flows yoga teachers, or for the teacher who's never said anything to their students about what's happening in the world, what do you think would be a small thing that they could say at the beginning of the class where you just feel I feel seen in this class?
Mm-hmm. I love starting a class or a sitting practice with an intention. So in the language that I'm kind of working with, it's a spiritual ideal. And I think starting with an intention, and I have loved it in the past when teachers say it's an invitation to say, it can be acceptance or whatever's coming up for you. And if nothing is coming up for you, my intention or what I'm working with today is peace and justice. Or if there's a moment either before, I love that idea before class, because I think sometimes we do a lot of vinyasa yoga teachers just kind of start, and then at the end you do an or kind of a moment of connection or some words. But I think words of gratitude and just mentioning conflict in the world, and that we're practicing nonviolence. I don't feel like I'm languaging it very well, Shannon. I'm
You
kind of
are. This is perfect.
I need to.
This is I'm asking you as the student. You're not putting together the class, and I'm telling you, this is absolute gold. So it's really helpful. I'm just asking you for some ideas, and you're coming up with all kinds of them. I know that our yoga teachers will be able to do this beautifully. Some of them might be afraid, some of them might be thinking, well, I don't know the whole history of the area, or I don't really know what's going on. I think if you know right now that 25,000 children are now orphans in Gaza, even starting there.
Even starting there, you don't need to know anything. I think what you need to know is innocent people are dying. And when I say innocent, that word may not land, or who is innocent, I don't know. Right. But again, kind of tripping up on the language, but I just say people are dying.
People just like us, just average civilians living their lives, just, trying to get their kids up and going in the morning and make sure everyone's fed. Yeah.
Exactly. This is not a quote war.
No, it
This is
isn't.
just people being mowed down on our watch. And that's really all you need to know. I think it comes down to, do we think every life has a spark of divinity? Do we think every life has value? And then from there, what do you do with that? Do you truly believe everyone has value and every life is precious? That's really all you need to know. I mean, and if you want to know, I always look at like what are the human rights activists all unanimously saying? Like, okay, look to the human rights activists and organizations. They are all united. That's a wonderful place to start, right there.
It's so true. It's so true. You could know nothing and just listen to like whoever you choose, UNICEF, some children's human rights You're right. They're all united in this. Yeah. I also want to say what a gift you are as a lawyer out there in the world, like also teaching lawyers. I'm super grateful that I feel like yoga is getting into the law spaces this way.
So it's a little sneaky. I think it starts with stress relief, quote unquote. I've gone to meditation retreats for lawyers, and it's been incredibly helpful with like conflict. See, as a lawyer, difficult conversations are like, that's my job. Like, that's my day job.
Right.
So part of me is like, oh, did you think being a yoga teacher meant that you could get out of difficult conversations? Like we're humans. Like, of course, they're going to show up with, the studio owner or, you know what I mean? Like, they're always going to be, it's like sort of like, I don't want to offend people. Well, it's happened. Like, you've already offended people in your life. Like, so we're
Mhm.
there. And also trying to figure out how I bring yoga, into my day-to-day work. Because you can, again, that's why I practice. One of my favorite yoga teachers used to say, if you can put your ankle behind your ear, but you're a jerk off the mat, you're not practicing yoga.
So, so true.
And again, right, my gratitude to yoga teachers. I heard that in 2000. I've never forgotten it.
Right.
23 years later, something that a yoga teacher said had a huge impact. He does not know that. He has no
Right.
clue.
Right.
So, I think that's really important. Like yoga teachers' words carry weight. They are important.
Yeah. Oh, I
So,
was in a class like studying diversity, equity, inclusion with Tristan Katz, and they said free Palestine, like at one point, and I was like, I don't know what they're talking about. And that was 3 years ago. Like I literally, and that made a huge impact because then I was like, maybe I should just learn about this because it must be important. And then when I started learning, I was like, this seems strange. And it really did that, didn't the learning about it didn't I didn't really think I could do anything about it for a long time. And here we are having this chat today about I really do think that the small tiny conversations that we have and the tiny things that we say as yoga teachers and humans can make a big difference.
they really do. I think there's big acts, but they're made up of tiny moments. And powerful moments. And another thing that just popped into my mind as you were saying that, heart meditation. Hello, heart meditation. The Buddha's prayer for peace that, no one shall be harmed. May no one be harmed. That's a wonderful thing. Like there's so many different ways to offer a different perspective in the world. And I was just watching a video of the UN representative from the United States when he called and he vetoed the ceasefire. his hand was shaking. You can see his hand is by the microphone, and it is like shaking.
I didn't notice that.
And I realized like that is his nervous system as he is in that moment. Like, yeah. I was like, what? This is going to sound really dumb and naive. Like, what if we all practiced yoga? Like, what if he was able to regulate and sit in that discomfort and breathe? Get out of fight or flight and think, what the am I doing? What is happening? Like, wake up. And we have to be, like, what if he could self-regulate in that moment and pause and breathe? Would he have made a different choice? I don't know. But when someone is that agitated, that hijacked, no hope, he's just completely in fight or flight. I can have empathy for him. I have empathy with other people, but I just wonder what would have been different. Could there be difference if we were all practicing and breathing and being in the present moment and just like waking up? Like, what am I doing? Now, could I have gone to him in that moment and been like, wake up? This
is a bad idea.
Yeah, bad idea. I would have been like, take it off the floor. That's where discernment comes in. And I think that's also part of this. I have been in some very difficult DMs with people because I post a lot. And I do think it's okay to think it is not my job to walk up to every single person with righteous indignation and be in that I'm right, you're wrong, and think that I'm going to personally argue to death every person who feels differently about this. Now, as a lawyer, it occurred to me, like, I will just out argue everyone, right? Like, my facts and my history and and not everyone wants to listen. It's okay to strategically go, it's not where I want to put my energy is fighting this person. I'm just building the hate, right? Like, if I meet hate with hate, I am building hate. That's that's not practicing nonviolence either, Shannon. So I love the idea of just being discerning, like, who's open to it. Like, it's okay to walk away from DMs.
Yeah.
And I did that. I said to the person, I don't want to build more hate. I love you. Unfollow me.
Right.
And I just haven't responded since.
Right. And that's really compassion for that person in that moment. I love this. I love how you said, if we're spreading hate, that's just going to build more hate. I think we can all take that away right now. And it was Rula who I did a live podcast episode with. She's in Jordan. She's a Palestinian yoga teacher. It's not out on the podcast yet, but it's coming out really soon. And there's a live on YouTube. Also, if you want to see the whole things, we talked for a really long time. She left me a message today and said, we're going to have to keep working at this as yoga teachers, because even if there's a complete ceasefire right away, there's a ton of anger and hate and hurt that's sitting underneath this. On top of, and she didn't say this part, but I'd say on top of everyone going through a global pandemic, on top of witnessing what happened with the murder of George Floyd and like a kind of a waking up then, we've got a lot of things that we're working through all at once. So I appreciate you saying, and I would love to hear from our connected yoga teacher listeners who have ideas of like how they're building connections, how they're, working through this, what they're saying to their students. I bet there are a lot of studios and teachers that are doing something, even if it's a tiny thing that they're saying at the beginning, So I'd love to hear those as well.
Yeah. And look around the class, who is in the class? Am I being inclusive? Does everyone feel welcome in this space? I I really feel for Palestinian Americans who are who are watching their relatives, their friends, and living in a society that um, it, it I are we including everyone in the practice of yoga? If we feel that yoga is for everyone, like, are we really connected in our communities and making sure it's truly inclusive? Um, I just ordered a bumper sticker that says "End Apartheid, Boycott Israel, Free Palestine," and I'm I because I feel like it's really important right now and will be for a long time to vocally, publicly make a statement so that people who are feeling like, wow, the United States has really left me, that we're not, there's people who are in empathy with them. Um, I think it's really important, especially as white people, to do that.
I appreciate this, that you're doing this so that other people who are seeing that feel like, "Oh, I am valued. Someone is listening to me." It's like the whole of the government of the United States right now, or for me, Canada, because we're waiting on pins and needles here today as we're talking, like the UN's gonna gather again and Canada's in on this one, doesn't talk for us. Like, we know that the majority of United States residents and Canadian residents want a ceasefire right now. We know that the government isn't representing that. Like, they're not showing up. So I love that you're thinking of how can I show up? I've been giving this a
Right? We
lot
don't
of
want to be
thought. Mhm.
bystanders. We don't want to be bystanders. And
I appreciate
that's
this so much because I've been saying to some people, "Okay, if you and I were living at the time of the Holocaust, would you be speaking up right now?" And people are like, "Of course I would be. Yes."
no, no. I, so I studied history and I've read a lot of contemporaneous writings. And this one writing, and I can look up the author if you're interested, she describes being on a train and some German soldiers come on and race to the train and grab someone and just pull him off. And no one did a thing. It's a train full of people. So two German soldiers, could they have been like overtaken by a whole group of people? Of course they could have. And reading that memoir stuck with me. It was so surreal. And I was like, oh, that couldn't be true. But of course, like now I'm like, oh, of course it was. Well, of course it was true. It was like, a verified historical account. So like, yes, it
Yes.
happened. But I couldn't imagine it. And now I can totally imagine it. I 100% can imagine it. And it's terrifying. You're absolutely right. What you would have been doing is what you're doing now, 100%.
I know. And if someone is challenging that and saying, "No, this is totally different," I'd take a deep look at just the facts, just the numbers, just the number of casualties right now.
Right. I come back to, does every life have value?
Yes,
And that's it. That's like all you need. Does every life have value?
I know.
And we're
Thank you
done.
for being in those tough conversations in the DMs, even if you're like, this isn't working. I've also had some similar situations, and I'm here if anybody's listening and they're like, "Gosh, I'm having these tough conversations and I don't know how to do it." I don't really either. I don't have all the answers, but I try and like come with compassion and empathy. And then questions. Really, questions are a great way to get into it. If you're like, "Oh, That's why I asked that one. Like, if you and I were in this time of the Holocaust, would you be speaking up? I like people to think, yes, I would. Okay, let's just tap into that little energy.
I think another great question is, it's 1850. How do you feel about slavery? You know what I just found out, which was so chilling to me? And again, I studied history, but I didn't know this. How few abolitionists there were. Most white liberals in the North were like, slavery's bad, but it's really complicated and it's going to upend the economy of half of our nation. So let's just keep it separate and then they're free when they get here. Like, that was actually most people. It was actually radical. You were somewhat ostracized if you were an abolitionist. So, does every life have value? Do you really believe we should not enslave other people? Like, let's not even look to another country. Like, let's just stay in because we're a settler colonial state.
Yeah, you and I are both living on stolen land.
Would you have thought of a Native American as a terrorist when they attacked white settlers? We didn't use that word then. That's probably what we would have, quote, we would have called that situation.
Yeah.
They were attacking white settlers. Of course. Taking away their land. I mean, so I mean, I think the discomfort about what's happening is our own discomfort with our unhealed trauma of World War II, enslaving other people, and enslaving and killing Native Americans. So we have to confront a lot of our past here. It's bringing up a lot for people, and it's okay to acknowledge that, and then do the work. And yeah.
I appreciate you bringing this in. I think I've read certain comments and I'm like, this is bringing up, like, I heard this same language because I love to read history books. You hear the same language around slavery, around indigenous rights and land and colonization. For sure. For sure. It's a lot to think about, and it's also really simple. Like, you bring it back to, okay, does every life matter? Is that because it's very easy? And I feel like yoga teachers have one of the easiest jobs to say, like, I'm all for peace. I actually don't think killing anyone is the solution to any conflict. That's what I started with. And people were like, really? Nothing? And I was like, that's right. That's right. I'm not justifying any killing. Is this weird? Like,
And it's so interesting, Shannon, when you say that. I feel a little. It's so interesting. I guess my discomfort is peace and justice. I don't know that we can know peace without justice.
right.
Because I kind of reflect back, like, should the Native Americans just been like, okay, peace out, like, all right, it's all yours. Or in Canada, First Nations, like, right, like,
Right.
okay, so right, like, are the Palestinians not supposed to do anything? So
Oh,
that's where I
right.
am, like,
Right.
a little juicy
Oh,
about
right.
it. Like, I'm working through it. I'm working through it.
I totally understand what you're saying right now of, like, we have the right to defend. Like, if someone came into my home and started attacking me and my family, do I have the right to defend? It's really good. It's a really good pondering for us to go into. I guess I was like, I knew right away, okay, this awful thing happened to Israeli people on October the 7th. Does that give the government of Israel the right to just wipe out a whole group of people? I was like,
Well,
no,
that's a
actually,
war
I'm
crime.
against that.
I'm against war crimes. Yeah.
Right.
I'm
War
against collective
crimes,
punishment.
genocides,
I'm
treating people.
laughing. This is the nervous laughter, right? Like, this is like just me, like, no.
I do the
Like,
same thing because I'm
stop.
like, whew, it's a good release. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your perspective as a yoga student of what it's feeling like in a yoga studio right now. I'm hoping we hear from other yoga students also in the comments of like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's how it feels weird. Or here's where it got really uncomfortable because there actually was a discussion. Like I said, we don't know what we're doing. We'll figure this out. I'm just so grateful for your time and for your, like, for you standing up and speaking up and really thinking of how you can help even someone to feel safer in the US. I think that's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for modeling, social justice in yoga. I've been practicing for 23 years, 25 years. I've always thought about being a teacher, but no teacher certification really called to me. And knowing that there's yoga teachers like you with a community, it gives me hope maybe you'll get certified one day. So you're kind of inspiring me a bit. Um, and and I think there's power in this. This is a flashpoint for the yoga community who is hungry to do something with their practice, to be mobilized. This is a wonderful opportunity. So my hope is that more yoga teachers will join and realize that many students are curious, they want to hear. We're looking for leadership from our yoga teachers, and for fearlessness and for bravery. And speaking truth to power is really difficult. It can be uncomfortable, but again, that's why we practice yoga, is to be in that discomfort and practice nonviolence, right? It's number one. So there we go. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I also want to say, our yoga teachers who are running yoga teacher trainings, that's another reason to make sure that you're following what's happening in the world. Susanna Barkataki does an amazing job. I'll link to her in the show notes. She has a fantastic training where she pulls in a lot of teachers and really does focus on social justice. And also, I did a solo episode of here are the questions that I would ask now to a yoga teacher training. And one of them would be I would be checking, is this person speaking up right now? Or are they staying silent? So thank you for this. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon.
Oh my goodness. Connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you on this one. And I also want to say a huge, huge thank you to Suzanne for, first of all, reaching out and saying, here's how I'm feeling as a yoga student. This began as a quick message on Instagram. Somehow Suzanne found me on Instagram. We found each other. I don't know how we found each other, but it was over really standing up for Palestinian voices. And then she let me know how she was feeling as a yoga student. And I said, can you send me a quick message back, maybe a couple of paragraphs? Maybe I'll try and share it in a podcast episode or on something on Instagram or something. And this is where this episode came out of. She agreed to then come on the podcast because I was like, wow, this is powerful. And I didn't even know the whole story with going to the studio at that point. So I'm so grateful that she came and shared. And I want to ask you, connected yoga teachers, how can we hold space for all of our students? So imagine that we have students coming in who aren't watching the news at all. Maybe they have other things going on in their lives. Imagine that we have Palestinian students walking in who are very worried about their family and friends. Imagine that we have Jewish and Israeli students coming into our class who are also facing such a backlash of hate. I know it's a lot to consider and hold, and I know that all of you can do it because we hold space for so many other things that arrive to our class. And the only way maybe that we can hold space for this is we make sure that we are doing our own inner practice so that when someone comes to tell us their really real and raw feelings about what's happening, we can see them in that moment. We can sit with it and notice if it's really triggering to us. And it may be really triggering. And then we need to sit with it a little bit more and find more resources. Oh my gosh, I want to link to this amazing resource shared by Bo Forbes. Wow, I am so impressed. Thank you, Bo, for putting this together. It's a document of talking points. It's on Substack. If you go and check it out, consider if you can paying Bo for her time to put this all together. I had someone who I would not say shares the same views as me on this, and I shared it with them and they're like, this is really well done. So, it's full of facts and information when someone can say that. So all of the show notes will be over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/356, or you could go to our website and just type in silence in the search bar and it should come up. I want to hear from you as well. What small things can you say to let your group of students know that you are acknowledging what's happening right now in the world? And there are lots of things going on in the world. What language are you using? Share in the comments if you can on our website, or reply to our email if you want it to be more private, and let us know how you're sort of bringing this in without focusing your whole class on it. I realize that's not why people come to class, but I want to hear the really great things. Or maybe you are in a yoga class and the teacher says something and you're like, this really soothes me right now in what I'm watching. So thank you so much for being here all the way to the end of today's episode. Thank you, Suzanne Crunch and Sinead, for all that you do. Oh my gosh, you do amazing work in this world and you show up as unbelievable humans, caring for people, animals, the planet. I'm so grateful for our team. Thank you also, dear listener, for all the work that you are doing by sharing yoga with people who really need it right now. And don't worry, remember what I said earlier? We can do this messy. We haven't been in this space before. We don't know what we're doing. It's okay for it to look imperfect. It's okay when someone reaches out and says, this thing that you said kind of triggered me or upset me. Can we chat about it? Can I tell you that? That's a good place to be when someone will let you know, hey, this is upsetting for me. Okay, so my question is, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?